I myself, the producer of this podcast, is not eligible to diagnose anyone with a mental health disorder. This podcast is purely for artists discussing the mental health hurdles they struggle with on a daily basis. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. And today I am talking to another artist who I did meet through Facebook, but in, I guess, a funny way. He was doing sound design in my one scene I did for this film, and I thought that was really, really funny, or ADR if you want to call it. And then, we became, as most people in the industry do, friend request. And when I posted about this, this gentleman reached out and was like, I think this would be a good topic. And like I said, I know I keep breaking the fourth wall in these episodes. Most of the guests that come on here do pick their topics. So today I have Rob Acocella here, and he wants to talk about the pressures of making it. What's going on, Rob? How are you?
Hey Chris, well thanks for having me. And yeah, I when you announced that you were doing a podcast that touches on mental health struggles in the arts, I knew that I wanted to be involved in some way. I think we're none of us that work in this for any period of time are stranger to variety of I don't like the word conditions, situations and
Yeah.
pressures, and because it manifests differently in everybody. And having having been in the creative world as my profession for, I mean, quite a long time. Let's just say that, in different capacities, like I've been through different types of media. And so, I definitely have an understanding of what that does to a person. So, thanks for having me on. And I think this is going to be a really interesting talk.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I think it's interesting. I've had a good balance, mostly more women wanting to talk like about these, on this podcast, but
Well, guys don't wanna talk about mental health, like,
no,
we don't
no.
want to admit that we're, stressed out or something's, too much of a burden. It's just by nature, like, we think that we need to be strong through it all, but, I've found that, facing it down actually works a lot better than running from it.
Yeah, I mean, so really quickly, I started going to therapy like 2 years ago, and I didn't want to go. Like, my then girlfriend, now wife, she started going, and I saw like kind of like how it was really helping her, and she was really like the only person I would feel comfortable crying in front of. No one else, like not my family, none of my friends really. I only really ever like would break down and cry like on like drives to work because they're 40 minutes longer and I can compose myself or things of that nature. And but it was I say that because it was I was by myself, and it's kind of touches on what you said. Like most men are conditioned to whether it is from men in our lives as when we were kids, or society, or just in general, like men were never really known to be able to really talk about this stuff or be open about it. I'm a big sports fan, and I see a lot of big, especially basketball. If for those who don't know me, for those who know me, they're not shocked at all. But like Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, they came out and talked about how they were depressed. And I think that's really big for athletes to do as well, especially male athletes, right? And I'm just happy. Like like what I'm trying to get at is I'm very grateful that like men are willing to come on here and talk about it, because it's very rare that happens. So I appreciate you coming on here and willing to talk about just talk about what what this specific topic, the pressures of making it. You said you've been in the industry a very long time, or quite some time, different industry jobs. You know, what sort of pressure do you put on yourself to like quote unquote make it as an artist?
Wow, so the pressure to make it is, massive. It's massive because, well, for one, well, let me actually, if you don't mind, I just kind of I want to go back a little bit. And anytime I do any of these, podcasts or interviews, I always end up kind of telling my story really quick.
Yeah, please do. I just told mine, so yeah, please do.
All good. I mean, and I think that it's not about talking about myself, but I think
Well, we're getting to know you. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of artists on here, like, I did an interview the other day, and this girl was like, "Well, we're talking about my project." I was like, "Yeah, well, we're doing the same topic you're doing, the pressure of making it." So, I think you're more than welcome to share who you are, so people can get like a better understanding of, like, who you are. So please, like, go ahead.
awesome. Yeah. So I mean, because I think it'll lend some perspective to where I'm coming from. So I grew up in a family business. My parents had a printing business, so I was in the visual arts and in the media, so to speak, from a young age. And the work that we did at that company spanned all kinds of stuff. So some of it was really creative and artistic, some of it was for major brands, and sometimes it was just little business cards for like local businesses. And I'm talking about going back, I was born in '83, so over the years, there's been a big change in what
Yeah.
printing businesses even provide at this point.
That's interesting. Actually, you got to see the progression. I was born in '87, but my parents were artists, but nothing like of that, like owning a company of that nature. So you really got to see, I guess, the process of print business and everything move from that to the digital age.
Yeah, and my role at the company, once I was old enough to work there full time, which I really started doing while I was in school. While I was in high school, I would get a ride up to the office after school for my mom and spend a few hours and come home with my dad. Then on weekends I'd be up there, and then once I got my license, I was driving up there on my own all the time.
And where'd you grow up?
I Bergen County,
Okay, okay.
not really right outside Manhattan.
Yeah.
Um, so my particular role at the company was as a pre-press manager, and basically what I did was I saw the projects from when the artwork and the files and all that stuff was brought to us, and then prepped for printing, and then all the way to out the door. I mean, there were you know small family business, or none. I'm sure anybody out there who's been in that situation is no stranger to we wear many hats. So I'd get the work. I'd sometimes go to the client, pick the work up, bring it back, and help to oversee to some degree the actual production of it, and then sometimes go back out and actually just hand deliver stuff. So
Hmm.
I was in it, and I always had a love for music, hard rock, heavy metal, like all that good stuff that you'd expect someone who was a child in the '80s would be into.
Yeah.
And I met this girl who was my girlfriend, and now she's my wife. So similar to you, these kind
Awesome.
of stuff stems back to women, right?
Always, yeah.
Um, and she had a love for music as well. So we decided, and we had lots of friends who were performing in bands and doing all that stuff. And we decided that we were going to start a small grassroots music magazine. So for I want to say it was a full decade. It might have been 11 years. We ran a small music magazine that we covered local bands, we covered national acts. I was at little dive bars doing interviews with you know 20-year-old band members who just recorded their demo, and then the next night I'd be at like the Starland Ballroom or something, and I'd be on the tour bus with Shinedown
That's
talking with
awesome.
them. So we were, it was cool. We got to kind of run the gamut of the music industry and talk to people on all different levels. Um, and right there was a pressure to succeed, right? I mean, I'm coming at I'm a little nobody, and I'm coming at major record labels, Atlantic Records. I'm like, hey, I want to talk to Dimebag Darrell, when Damage Plan is in town. And I don't know if it
Mhm.
was just because I was ballsy enough to do it, but we landed that stuff. So I never actually got to speak with Dimebag Darrell, but I did get to do an interview with his singer when he was in Damage Plan, and that was actually 4 days before he was murdered in Ohio. I saw the band, photographed them live, and well, here's another great example. I saw the band, photographed them, had just bought a brand new camera. Um, and didn't really know the controls on it and the settings and stuff yet. Walked away with pretty crappy pictures, in my opinion. And I said to myself, I'll shoot them again when they come back next time, because they just told me that they were going to be on tour again in a few months
Yeah.
after the new album came out. Well, 4 days later, that was the end of it. And that was a big kick in the ass, man. That was a moment where I was like, I'm working in the media. I have this family business connection that allows me to actually print a magazine, and that is giving me access to artists that I have looked up to my whole life. I mean, people that I grew up listening to, and I have posters on my wall, and I'm hanging out with them, and I'm like, I can't waste this opportunity. And that was the moment that I decided to take my interest in photography a lot more seriously, because I was just doing photography for the magazine, just going out grabbing some live photos and stuff like that, for reviews and stuff that we would write. Not really thinking I was going to make that the career. I thought that the journalism part of it was going to be the career.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, I can't waste this opportunity. Like, this is, that was gut wrenching. I mean, Dimebag was one of my heroes.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I got a little late into heavy metal per se. I was like 16 or 17. I listened to a lot of different stuff. I'm not. I used to be ashamed of like listening to all different types of stuff. Now I mean, I'm 34 years old. Like, I don't know, I don't really care. Like, I pay bills. I can listen to whatever the fuck I want to listen to, kind of thing, But yeah, the first time I heard like Domination from them, and obviously like their popular stuff, Cowboys from Hell. But I even remember back in high school when he got shot. I think 2004. You said 2005. I was a junior. I was a sophomore or junior, and I remember hearing that. Like, I always tell people, like, everyone's like, Chris, where did you fit in? I was like, well, some of my best friends like listened to Metallica and Pantera. Then some of my best friends were on the basketball team with me. Then some of my best friends were like in theater. I'm like, I had my hand in different pots. I remember my friends who listened to heavy metal, like they were devastated. And I guess I didn't understand it. And then when I listened to them and then I went back and I heard it, same with like Metallica. I was very young, but like hearing that Cliff Burton, if I'm getting his name correctly, how he died, during that bus accident. It's like, gee, and how Metallica people say really was never the same, so to speak. That's just, yeah, it's just tragedy. So I couldn't imagine like where you were, like you were on the highest of high, and then like 4 days later, not only you were like, and I think it's okay like to feel like shit, like I just had a really good contact, my idol just got killed in the worst way possible. Or an artist that you love, and then it's like, well, shit, I had this opportunity. Like now they may not even ever tour again. Like it's just that mixture of things. Because you said you were still, you're only 4 years older than me, so you were like in college. You said, right?
Yeah, so actually, and that's actually one of the things that kind of made it sting. Well, down the road, kind of made it sting, was I actually didn't go to college, at least not when
Hmm.
I was supposed to.
I started late as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I went right from high school into the family business, and so it was a. I mean, I learned up against the ropes. Like, I learned how to run a business by watching my father, watching the things he did right, watching the things
Hmm.
he did wrong, and deciding which elements I was going to emulate. Right, and that
Yeah.
that also, I think, plays into this idea of of making it, of what defines success. Right, it's about the decisions that you make.
Yeah.
But yeah, regarding that whole thing, man, like I would have been in college, but I decided to kind of go my own way there. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I was devastated. It took me months to
Bounce back.
bounce back. Yeah, to get back
And
on my
you,
feet.
You were with your wife at the time, right? You guys were dating. How did she take it?
So she was very upset too. I don't think at the time, I don't want to speak for her, but I don't, if I remember right, I don't think at the time she was the like a huge, like, super fan type, right? Like, she knew Pantera's material. She
yeah.
listened to Damage Plan because I would force her to listen to Damage Plan in the car. Um
That's what I do with my wife with certain things. I'm like, just listen and enjoy it. And none of that's happening.
yeah, yeah. So, like, but for her, again, being a lifelong fan of music, just the fact that a musician was killed doing what they do, making people happy,
Yeah.
expressing their art form, and some lunatic rushes the stage and puts a bunch of bullets in them. Like, um, she was really upset too, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a fan of their genre or even their band.
Just, yeah.
Um, it's just the aspect of like, we are artists in general, to lump us all in, are, we're people who are blessed to get to do what we do for a living. We get to do something that fulfills our own, needs deep down, but also brings joy to other people. And, to lose your life doing that is really just unspeakable.
Yeah, yeah. He, if I'm not mistaken, didn't the kid, I don't know if it was a kid or a guy, but they shot him, and he said because they said that he broke up Pantera, right? Or something along the lines of that.
His name was Nathan Gale, and I honestly, like, because I'm still kinda mad about it, I don't really wanna give him too much, attention, but yeah,
Of
it would
course, yeah,
he
yeah.
was he was actually another man who had some very serious mental health issues that were not addressed. He was discharged from the military because he was, mentally unstable.
Mhm.
His mother gave him a handgun as a gift for having been in the military, and he was of the impression that uh, he had actually written a bunch of Pantera songs and they stole them from him.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a really messed up situation, and he
Yeah.
had said things. See, he had said some things about other band members, ex band members from Pantera at the time, putting blame on them too, and it was just it was a really a needless tragedy. But
Mhm.
out of that came my determination to take my photography more seriously, and, from there on out, the story just kinda goes, I think, the way it goes for most people who discover cameras, right? They go from taking still photos to starting to mess around with video. So because I had the journalism thing going on, I was one of the early investors in the Canon 5D Mark II, which was
Oh, wow.
the first DSLR to take video, and
Yeah.
we started doing video interviews instead of print interviews. The whole magazine eventually migrated to being digital, rather than in print. And it was at that time I was doing a lot more video shooting than photo shooting, and I was, doing a lot of editing. And I decided, this might be really cool to pursue as a career, as a new career. Now, keep in mind, at this point, we're years past the economic crash of '08. I saw my father's business struggling terribly. I mean, like most mom and pop businesses, that he was scraping by, and I knew that it was ultimately a sinking ship, or at least, if it stayed afloat, it wasn't going to allow me to support myself, long term like I needed to.
Mhm.
So, started looking into career options, shooting and editing video. And at the time, and I know this isn't the case anymore because these trends change, these hiring trends, these HR trends. But at the time, around 20, I want to say 2012, 2013, 2014, something like that. A lot of corporate entities wanted you to have a formal degree in filmmaking to be considered for any of their in-house shooting opportunities. And I didn't have that because I skipped college, right? So
Mhm.
at 30, I decided it would be a good idea, already married, trying to, get my life in order and working a full-time job, already starting to do some side gigs, with obviously with my camera already. Decided, yeah, why not? Let's do 4 years of college. I mean, how bad could it be, right?
Yeah.
Wow, man, talk about a smack to your mental health. That was not simple. Those 4 years, I loved them. I enjoyed them. I appreciated everything that I got out of it. My network grew super strong. I made some great connections with people who are still doing what they went to school for. And, a lot of my early jobs now in my current career as a sound designer came from those connections. So I don't regret it one bit. I'm proud of myself for having done it, but that was tough, man.
What made it so tough? And I don't mean to ask, was it just like the age difference? Was it just like not knowing certain softwares? Was it, I'm going to be honest with you. I guess I never realized it, like, you know, the mentality of someone in their 30s versus their 20s, and things of that nature. Like, I started school when I was 22, right? And was very wide eyed, and I don't want to say I was naive. I think I just had a lot of ambition. And now, 12 years later, I'm not saying I've lost any ambition, definitely not, but it's more so, I think I'm more realistic with like what what could happen, what's going to happen. I wouldn't say I'd say I'm slightly jaded, but like, I think when you're working with someone who's a little bit younger, they think like it's like, I could, like if you work with someone younger, they're like, let's do everything, let's do it all. And sometimes it's not that way. So were those some of the challenges, or was it just like just the workload versus like having a full-time job? I'm sure, like what was so like mentally harrowing about it?
There were multiple layers to it. I mean, for sure, the time investment was difficult. I mean, I started as a part-time student, thinking I was going to finish in about 6 years if I spaced it out, and I did that so that I could focus on my full-time job and my side gigs, and my family, and just so that I would have the breathing room. But it started after like a year and a half, it started to just get too much. And I'm like, I just got to rip the band-aid off. So I transitioned to full time. And in fact, I was doing double duty. I was doing summer, winter. I was doing
All year
17,
round.
yeah, 17, 18 credits a semester because I just wanted to get the credits in. I wanted to get it done. So I started off part time. I switched to full time, and I still managed to get done in 4 years, which anyone who's done 4 years knows that's a lot of time that you have to invest in that to begin with.
Yeah.
And on top of it, yeah, the age difference was an issue in some cases. Not throwing shade at any of my former classmates, because the issue wasn't really them. The issue was uh I start off right in like the 101, 201 level courses where I'd been doing all this stuff already. Like I was self-taught, and I got like a certificate, a professional photography certificate from NYIP, back in the day. And so I knew about lighting. I'd been literally out there doing the work, producing
Hmm.
music videos and things like that. So a lot of the courses at first were pretty boring because it's like I was almost like a teacher's aide, like kind of helping everything along. So that was kind of a drag because I was like, well, I'm paying a lot of money and I'm paying out of pocket to be here and learn stuff. And I'm like, well, I got off YouTube years ago, like I already understood this stuff.
Yeah.
Then once I got what I was looking for, it got a little harder. Then that was a different story, right? But the the issue also, yeah, being that like when you would, film is a collaborative endeavor. It's not like writing or painting where it's like you're learning techniques and you're doing it on your own. You're you're writing screenplays and you're producing shorts and stuff, sometimes right there during class hour, sometimes on your own time. You've got acting classes that are required to take so you can learn how to direct actors and all this stuff that they tell you. And it's all absolutely valid, but it is incredibly difficult when you're a 30 something who knows why you're there, and you made a very conscious decision to switch careers into knowingly a very difficult career path to break into. And I'm there with like sort of laser focus on my end goal, and I'm with a bunch of kids who mean well, but they got time. If this doesn't pan out, they got a few years to teenagers or even go back after they're done and like switch it up. They're not already into their 30s and married and trying to like really like officially get their life started. Like
Hmm.
that's what your 20s are for, is to kind of like
Yeah.
learn and figure this stuff out. So that was a little bit difficult because sometimes the attitudes and the dedication didn't really align. um so that made it challenging. And then honestly, just the never being home because I'm either at work or I'm at school. uh Film classes are like not your normal like hour and 15-minute school classes. They're like 3.5 hours.
Yeah, no, I remember my classes were 6 to 10, 1 to 5, or 8 to 12.
Yeah, and
And
you get like a
those,
10-minute break.
yep.
So
Yeah, yeah, you get an hour break, which is like in that hour break for me, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this jump start on this edit. And anyone who's ever edited, there's once you like finally sit down and line everything up, it's like, okay, the next class is starting. You're like, son of a bit, like what the hell's going on? Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's a very interesting perspective that you're saying. Like, everyone that you're in class with is like they still kind of have some their 20s to figure shit out, and that's everyone's 20s in my opinion. I remember when I turned 30, I was telling my mom, like, God, I don't want to be 30 at all. And my mom's like, well, the 30s are where you kind of like figure your shit out, or like you kind of, you're a lot more wiser, and you may have the money to now do things, and it's nice and all that. Personally, I haven't liked my 30s just because I've had personal issues. My 20s were like awesome, but then I have family members being like, oh no, dude, your 40s are where it's at, you know. So it's just, I think, going back to what you were saying though, yeah, like your 20s is where you're figuring out, and you're in these classes already knowing like what's going on. Like I learned all this shit already.
Well, yeah, it was the I learned it already. That made it easy, right? It made it
Yeah,
frustrating because I'm like, well, I guess I'm just gonna sit here and just put in the time,
yeah,
and not basic. So I mean, it felt like to some degree a ripoff because this was stuff that I could do already with my eyes closed, and I was paying $3,000 per semester for this one class that I literally already knew everything. Not to sound like a know-it-all, but I have already been doing this. And I actually had a professor come to me and say, like, "Are you getting anything out of this? Like, are you like, or like, are you really like get deriving anything from this class?" And you
yeah,
know, the the short answer is I always did find something, right? Because there's always the way you learn to do it, and then there's the way that someone teaches you how to do it. And sometimes those things aren't exactly the same. And sometimes it's a matter of wrong or right. I mean, if you're gonna if it comes to wrapping cables and you're overing a bunch of XLRs, like, now that I know better, I'd slap you. But so that you get somebody to teach you how to over under properly, and then you're not breaking your cables and having to replace them every 6 months. So that's helpful. Um, so there was always like a new I had to basically like get myself to find the new perspective that I could take on old information. And that really made it fun. Once I came to terms with that, that made it fun and I didn't feel so much like I was getting ripped off, right?
yeah.
So that was yeah, that was definitely
Nice.
an interesting journey.
Well, what post college, and now you're in your career, and you're in your, you're, like you said, you were very well versed in cameras, photography, camera work. I know just you as a sound designer working, on set audio, post production, all that. So for you right now, I guess, like, what are some outside forces that puts pressure on you to be successful? And you don't have to talk about right now. You could talk about, because you're coming from an interesting place. Like, you grew up with a family who already had a business. So from an outsider, myself, looking at that, I would just assume that they would be like, all right, Rob, you're taking over when we can't do it anymore. And there's really like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Right. Um, you know, how did your parents feel about you kind of like doing something artistically that wasn't like print, the print world, and you kind of like did your thing, and was there any like pushback from them? Was there any pressure to do that? Like, what are some just outside forces in your lifetime that you felt like to that just put pressure on you, whether it be like following your family's footsteps, or like, I'm gonna branch out, I'm gonna be my own person?
Yeah. That's actually that was a that exact topic that you're mentioning here was actually a really big point of stress for me for a very long time. And here's the thing. I looking back, I really think that some of the reason for that was that I wasn't clear and I wasn't addressing my feelings or even not addressing my interpretation of how things were going. So essentially, both of my parents were artistic themselves growing up. My dad was in a band. He loved music and he played guitar. So,
That's where your
you know,
love of music comes from, I'm sure.
right. And so like we always had that in common. And so I think I really believe he's always understood, the drive to work in art, to create, um, to do something creative for a living, because I mean, everybody who picks up a guitar and decides I'm going to be a musician now, they're thinking in the back of their head, like maybe I'll make money off this someday, like maybe this will be a career path. And
Yeah.
then we know it's like 1% out of everybody who ever learns an instrument actually goes on to do anything with it. Although Now the internet has sort of changed the level of exposure you can get, but still, are you really monetizing your YouTube channel to be able to retire on your demo tracks, right? But I always felt that, I had to be the good son, and I had to, show up and be there for the company. And yeah, it was always established that, like, well, I'm going to take over. It was supposed to be my sister and myself, and my sister showed no interest in the company, flat out said she didn't want to work there. And I was like, how can she do that? Like, how,
Yeah.
this is putting food on the table our entire lives. But she decided she wanted to do her own thing. So I stuck by my dad, and there were certainly times when business wasn't going so well, especially through some of the economic crashes, where I was like, I think I got to jump ship. But I always felt bad because my dad is an absolute master at what he does. He especially in the realm of like specialty finishing. So if you ever see like fancy packaging that has like gold foil leaf stamped onto it, or like, the words are embossed and popped up, like that's primarily
Hmm.
what he does, is embossing, die cutting, foil stamping. So, and he's known in the area for being one of the best. So, you know, he's great at that, but he didn't understand the technology side of anything. I mean, even trying to talk him through sending an email over the phone is like, it's like walking on glass sometimes. So, I just felt bad. I was like, if I leave, I'm going to leave him and he's going to be screwed. He's not going to know what to do. He's not going to know how to handle stuff. Um, so I always had this guilt, and I think for a long time I assumed that maybe it was the guilt was coming from him. Maybe I was sort of misplacing that feeling of like, well, he's going to be really mad if I leave and do something else. Um, and the more the older I get, and the more I do what I do, and the more I reflect on it, I really wonder if that was just a another one of those guy things, like going back to like men don't like to talk about their feelings. I wonder if that was just a self-imposed pressure to be the good son, and to to be there and do what I'm supposed to do, the air quotes supposed to do.
Hmm.
um, because it was talked about my whole life that I was going to take it over. So of course, you think about that from a young age, and you're like, well, that's the path, right? Anything else that I do has to just be done on the side. I can't possibly take away from the time I have to. I'm indebted to this man for feeding me and raising me. um, but yeah, like I said earlier, like got to the point where the business just wasn't doing well enough, and I told him, like so here's the thing, when I was doing the magazine, he was cool with me like taking off for a day to go do some interviews, or like if I had to go and like travel for a concert up upstate New York or something, like he'd be cool with it. Um, when I'd go on vacation, if I would go on vacation with my wife, I'd bring a laptop and like log in from remote and do stuff. And I said to him, I need to, eventually it just came down to like, I need to do this for me. Like I need to, like, this business may not always be here. This industry may not always be here. I mean, the printing industry in and of itself is a dinosaur, and they're not innovating. There's nothing to innovate. I mean, you're putting ink on paper, like sooner or later, with everything going digital, sooner or later, like there's not going to be a need for it. I mean, for instance, we used to do some packaging for like specialty CD wraps and stuff, like compact discs, like when people used to buy music on a shiny little circle of silver.
Yeah.
If anyone can remember back that far, dust off the cobwebs. And I mean, now you're listening to Spotify or Pandora, or at most you're buying digital MP3 downloads, from Amazon or something. And it's like, I personally still like to own physical copies of music. That's just me. But
Yeah.
I know that that's getting phased out. Just as a culture, we're losing that. So the need of putting ink on paper is dwindling. So I was like, listen, this industry is not doing well. It might not be here by the time I need to retire. I need to do something for me. And he was understanding about it, and we had an agreement where while I was in school, I would come in when I didn't have classes, and if I had to come in late or if I had to leave early to go to class, that was cool, as long as I did what he needed just to sustain the place for the day. That was cool, and I was cool with that. He was cool with that. It turned into me, logging in from remote when I'd have like long days where I would be on campus all day because of the way my schedule landed or something. But again, a lot of pressure there. So I had back to the topic here, like I had the pressure to make sure that I didn't fail him, right? That I didn't cause him to go under, because I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I did that.
Yeah.
And I had the pressure of like, well, I'm doing this for me. This education is for me. It's for my career. It's for my own advancement. And, I need to get good grades because, I don't want to have to repeat any classes. And, honestly, when I back in high school, I wasn't the best student. I wasn't stupid. I just made a conscious choice to not give a shit. I just
Yeah.
I had a bad attitude, and
Me too.
just, it wasn't good. And I almost I almost didn't graduate my senior year because I almost screwed up. Like I one class I almost failed, and I just passed it. And when I went to apply to the film program at Montclair State, my GPA was half of a point too low because of how stupid I was in action, stupid in action, in not caring
Mhm.
about my grades in high school. Because to me at the time, I wasn't going to need college. I was going to go into a business that was already established for me. And I was like, well, fuck it. Who cares? And man, hindsight is a bitch.
Yeah.
So, I had that pressure too that I was putting on myself of like, not only do I need to do well because I need to get through this program, but I don't want to relapse into being that person. I was taking this seriously. I was paying for this out of pocket. I didn't want student loans because I saw what that has done to family members and friends. And I was like, no, I'm gonna do this. And yeah, I did side jobs, and I worked, for some different clients and stuff when I didn't have class, and paid my way through that way. I didn't need to strip. I know that's a popular theory that people have to become strippers to get through college. You don't. That's all Hollywood. Don't buy it.
Yeah, yeah. Plus, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that at all. I would be owing the customers money.
Right? Yeah. Please stay. Here's money. Don't go.
That's interesting. That, like I said, we not similar paths, but like I was kind of the same, in the sense of my parents owned a restaurant when I was in high school, and it's not. I guess it could be a family business and whatnot, but I wanted nothing to do with that because I was just, everyone kind of makes fun of me for it still to this day that like I didn't like my sister. I have a younger sister. She's like, you didn't want to work at our parents' bar. This, and that. I was like, Emily, you want me to go to school, come work with them, then go back home. And like, it was okay. Like the restaurant was like up and down. Like, I don't know. I didn't want to be a dish. Like they didn't really give me, like my sister was a waitress. I didn't get that. I got fucking dishwashing. So that kind of was like, okay, like I'd rather just work somewhere else and kind of do my own thing. And unfortunately the restaurant didn't last too long, but like it just caused a lot of strife. So it was kind of like, all right, well, I always look back. I'm like, maybe it was a little disrespectful for me not to work there, and there was no pressure to work there. But I was just rather just kind of do my own thing and come into there when they needed help, but not make it like my full time job. You know, and right now, there's nothing right now where they're doing their own. My parents, are retired and working part time, so there's nothing like right now where I have to feel obligated to do anything work wise with them. But you know, I think there is some sort of you know in the beginning of like pressure of like taking a job that doesn't really pay, and then it's like, well, why are you doing it for free? Why are you working for free? Like I'm shooting a film of my own this weekend, finally, since the first time since COVID, and I saved money to pay everyone. And people, some people would be like, well, why would you be doing that? Well, people work harder and more efficient personally if they're getting paid. Like it is what it is. That's how work has been since money was a thing, really. If you want to be honest with you, like I feel bad asking anyone if they could work for free, but then why am I the one being so like, yeah, I'll do it for free, but that's more so acting gigs, like I'll just do that, because I believe in my talent will get me to a certain level to where I will it will be endless pay at some point in my life, but I think people put the pressure of it like, oh, you're spending a lot of time, a lot of hours doing this. Like, I don't get it, like, I think that all of that adds up in my opinion.
So I actually I got a little pushback on that, but back when I was doing photography, when I was doing my music magazine and I was going out and I was shooting all these concerts, and for me it was just I just loved doing it, like front and center beyond the barricade for for bands, just up there shooting. And I'd had actually my parents didn't question it so much, but one night my grandmother was like, well, how much do you make doing that? And I was like, well, I don't make anything doing that. I just do it because I'm going to publish them myself. And she's like, well, you're, you're driving down the parkway down, and you're paying tolls, and you're paying for parking, and you don't, if the magazine is free, you're not charging for that. It's just a freebie that they put out at music stores and stuff. So like, where do you make money on this? And I was like, well, I don't. She's like, well, isn't that stupid? And grandmothers can be pretty blunt. And I was
Oh,
like,
oh, yes,
yeah.
yes.
And I was like, huh. I was like, I got really pissed off. And I was like, well, how dare she? But looking at it now, I'm like, yeah, I think the problem with that model, the reason I wasn't getting paid was because um I was self-publishing, right? So if I was shooting and I was selling those images to another publisher, I'd make
Yeah,
money on the assignment or per image or whatever. Um, but it was for me. And my business at the time was really more of a hobby. It was insolvent. I sold some ads, and I got a couple of bands to buy ads and stuff in there, and it paid for gas money to go and self distribute, because I mean I was printing up 1,000, 2,000 copies of this thing, bundling up and bundling them up in hundreds, and then driving them to all the stores that were agreeing to put them on display next to the Aquarian Weekly and East Coast Rocker and all those. So um it was really a giant money pit. And so there was definitely once I came to that realization of like, wow, yeah, this is it's just a hobby. Like, I was calling it a business, and really it was just an expensive hobby, which is what I think a lot of musicians say about their own endeavors. um that was hard, but that was a valuable lesson, because yeah, when I got out of film school, then I had already determined, like, nope, I have a value. I came out of an education where for the first half of it, I could have taught the classes rather than attended the classes. So that was validation in my worth, and what I am capable of. And you know, so I made a determination that I wouldn't take on freebies, with
yeah,
maybe a few exceptions. Um, and again, that's a lot of self-inflicted pressure, but also, I mean, at this point, I'm in my mid 30s, and I've got bills to pay, and I've got my own shit to worry about. Um, so that's yeah, that was a very real situation of my eyes opening to don't waste your time. But to the end of shooting your film, and and doing acting for free and stuff, I think that it's something like, I mean, I had to do it too. I had to ask people to work for free. I had to do student projects that I didn't. The school doesn't give you a budget to make anything. You're lucky if the gear that you borrow from them even works, right? So
yeah,
I'm out there renting stuff, buying my own stuff, and I'm asking, actors, people who have done stuff already. I had one actor that I worked with a bunch, had been in quite a few productions. Another one had gone on to do some commercials and stuff, and now he's doing some other things. Um, and you got to ask people, like, hey, can you come out and spend like a long weekend, like with a bunch of boneheads who are figuring this out? Like, we don't know what we're doing, we're figuring it out. And
yeah,
hopefully it's going to go somewhere, but it's most likely going to just live on Vimeo for the rest of its days. Once it's done, it's not getting on ABC, right?
yeah, yeah.
So I get that. Like, I definitely relate to I don't like asking people to work for free either.
Yeah, I mean, if I in a perfect world, personally, if I could, I would have a sound guy, a DP, and a gaffer. Um, and then like I would have a few other people on set, but I could just like write stuff that I truly believe in. I'll direct it, and it's like could be a cast, and I would just make stuff like every weekend for like next to nothing, right? But it's just right now, unfortunately, you know, that's not the case. Like I would love to find someone who's kind of just eager to just like film content to just put it out there, you know? But it's, you know, right now it's just, I guess it's that's just the unfortunate side of like my situation. You know, I would just like to keep making content instead of like dropping on my end, you know, 1,500 to 2 grand for a short that, like you said, is going to just live on the internet. You know, I'm taking that L. I wouldn't even say it's an L. I'm just taking that like hit on financially, and maybe if I put it in festivals and it gains traction and something like that, that'd be great. But you know, at some point, I would like to just find like-minded people who just kind of want to keep making content, and just to put it out, and then like hopefully something sticks, if that makes sense. You know?
And that's the perfect segue, whether or not you actually intended to do that. But I think that that right there, you know, taking the L, right? Um, why do you say that, right? So like I'm just gonna guess, and you feel free to correct me. You're saying that
Yeah.
because you're doing this thing. It's born of your passion, right? And you just want to see it come to life, and you consider it an L because it's just gonna live on the internet.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, it's maybe it's going to end up in some festivals, maybe it's not, maybe you'll get an award, maybe you won't. But then once you're done dumping money into festival submission fees, you know, you're probably not going to ever actually get that pitch meeting with HBO that you originally had in mind for the concept when you first came up with
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's sometimes I'm not making something to like, oh, I wish HBO would do this. Like sometimes I just want to make stuff with like my friends I love who are really talented, you know, and and I should pay. So there's always a double-sided coin with that. Like I feel like that way, but then other times it's like, well, I don't want to like, should I just like focus on one project and like make that like my HBO pitch and then that, or like, you know, I'm not saying sometimes my goals, I'm not wondering what I'm doing, but it's like, you know, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't like, you know, sometimes I really just want to make some shit. Like, you know, I want to work on my craft. Like, yeah, I think going to acting classes will obviously help me, but that costs money. But you know what doesn't cost money sometimes, or just as much as money as acting classes? Is having a 5 to 6 person crew, a 2 to 3 character story, 2 locations over a weekend. Like that, to me, I could do that every weekend. Same, like me and the same actor or actress and the same crew and different, and someone has a story idea and just doing that and just having that. You saw it with like the whitest kids, you know, you saw it with Derek comedy, you saw it with like, you know, with certain other like skits on Instagram and stuff. You see that a lot, right? Or you even see it from like a production standpoint where it's like one director, same crew, same actors. Don't know if they're paying or not. I don't really ask people, because money is always a little. It's always a weird topic when you're in the independent side, or any side. But yeah, you know, I just, you know, there's times where I just feel like, man, I really feel like acting today. Like I feel it right now. Like I feel like I could do service to something, but it's always right now, in my opinion, it's always like, do I have the money to do it? And like, is it going to be worth it? You know?
But see, that's actually, so when you told me that we were going to be talking about, or rather when I picked the topic, right, because we already broke that fourth wall.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
picked the topic about the pressures of success in creativity, in the creative field, um, one of the things that really helped me, like, so through all those struggles that I mentioned, all those different pressures, family pressures, business pressures, being a grown ass man who needs to do a career change in his 30s, that shit's tough, man. But all those pressures, self induced or otherwise, one thing that I've always come back to, I would say that if you spent 2 grand in a weekend to to bring to life a story that you wrote, that you had a vision for, whether or not you get that on TV, whether or not that gets you, you know, an extra person in your network, or it gets you some contact somewhere that's gonna, you know, eventually lead to the big thing. Fuck that. It doesn't matter. Here's what matters. Do you feel, and this is, I'm asking you, but this, I'm also asking the listeners, and this is where my perspective is coming in now. Um, do you feel like that project was a success? Not did it go on to make a ton of money? Not did it get you a bunch of fame? Not do you get a bunch of laurels to put on, a poster on Instagram? But
Mhm.
did you accurately and successfully pull off the project that started as nothing more than just a daydream, just a creative string of thoughts that had no physical form whatsoever? It was just an idea. One day you're just like, ah, movie
Mhm.
theater going out of business. Hat tip to Maz Bouzidi.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know, um, Dude put together a great Clerks style film for his school. This is the project that we mentioned earlier that you were
Yes.
acting in and I was doing post production on. And it felt like Clerks, but it's called Concessions for anyone who wants to look
Mhm.
it up. It felt like Clerks, but it wasn't a rip off of Clerks. He
No.
one day had this idea. This kid worked in a movie theater and decided, man, what if we had one of those I'm not even supposed to be here kind of days, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you know what? And I can't begin to imagine what his thought process was as he went through it, but it literally started with like, well, what do I know? Therefore, what can I write about? and it
Exactly.
and it went from there. And little by little it turned into this really awesome film. It was one of my favorites from last year that I worked on. And I've worked on a bunch of stuff from low level indie student films up to doing some stuff that was on TV. And it was honestly, story wise, creativity wise, like, it was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And just so happens to be the way that you and I met, and now we're here doing this. So if it weren't for
Mhm.
that, then this wouldn't happen.
Exactly.
um, but that idea, whether or not that goes where he intended it to go, um, was a success, right?
Mhm.
It's a small success, but it's a success, and success is hard to come by. I think the problem is that we're living in, we've all, if you're alive while this is being recorded and eventually released, we are all living in a very materialistic present time, right? Um, and it's kind of always been that way, but it all seems, in my nearly 40 years on this planet, it only seems to be getting worse.
Mhm.
And I think that the thing that people lose, the insight that people lose along the way, is that success is internal. Success is
Yes.
personal, it's subjective. It's, you have to stop one day and say, what does success mean to me? And I know I sound like a therapist now, but you really do. You have to take a step back and you have to say,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
what am I fighting for? Like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I think I'm gonna get to some imaginary level of my career that, like, or am I just happy knowing that I want to be a creator? I'm have put in the time to hone my skills as a creator, and I've now
Mhm.
created something,
Yeah.
and then everything after that is just a cherry on top, right? All of that is just gravy, right? Um, if you successfully pull off a project with no money, that's a win. That's not an L. That's a
Yeah.
that's a W, man.
No, it's a good point for sure, man. Like it's kind of weird because like I moved back home in 2014 and I've done like four projects of my own. Some I've just directed and written, others I've directed, written, and acted in. All of them have won awards in the United States, like throughout like on the West Coast, mainly in Jersey here and there. And I've mentioned this topic right now. I'm about to say a lot through the episode. I do apologize a lot through the entirety of the podcast. I apologize about talking about it, but it's kind of goes into like this topic a little bit. I don't like, uh, before COVID hit, I was very much like, I'm a failure because I haven't worked with a celebrity. I haven't made a film to make it to like Sundance, Cannes, Toronto International Film Festival. I haven't worked with, a DP who can shoot on the red. There was all these fucking things in my mind that I was just beating myself down upon that I saw on social media or I saw being on other set and all that. You know, COVID hit, I had really, really terrible health issues. And then in 2021, my stepdad had like a massive stroke. Um, and you know, it's been really tough. It's probably going to be tough for a very long time. And all my pressures have kind of like gone away of of my of what I want to do with film. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I look at it as um you know, my wife and I have a baby girl on the way. My stepdad is going through hell. My family's kind of going through hell. So I think like all my focus is trying to like live and like try to enjoy like my moments with him and my moments with my mom and my moments with my wife and all that. And I guess the pressure of worrying if I'm going to make it or not isn't really at the forefront of my mind. And I'm not saying it's not that I don't give a shit about it. I just think there's more important things to worry about. And maybe it kind of goes into, I don't know if it would go into or not, what you said about the materialistic side of life right now, where if the hardest thing in my life was like, am I going to be the next uh, big thing as a filmmaker? Um, I mean, if that's the only thing that was in my mind, then like at that time, yeah, my life was pretty fucking easy, if I'm going to be quite like blunt right now. But when you have something traumatic happen, and life altering happen at the like so good and bad, you know, my stepdad had a stroke 2 months later. I found out I was going to be a dad. So like the waves of emotion were just at an all time high. Right. So yeah, I don't know. Like right now, I don't even, and I say all that, not to ramble, but I say all that because it's like, you know, what you said like kind of just triggered something to me. Like, man, like I woke up an idea in my head. I moved back from Jersey. 4 films of mine have won an awards, and I'm not bragging, but it's like to me, I didn't appreciate any of that. Like I didn't appreciate any of that in the moment, and that really fucking sucks because like I should have. But now I look back, haven't filmed in 2 years, um, because of COVID, health, a lot of stuff. And I'm like kind of grasping at those moments to be like, I want to relive them because I just didn't enjoy it. You know, that the quote from The Office, it's a silly quote, but Andy says, like, I wish you knew you were in the good times, like when they were happening. And that's, I feel that very much about like my career, you know, and my wife, you know, when she was, you know, dating me and all the time, she's like, you got to appreciate like the shit that you're going through right now. And it's like, man, like you don't appreciate it. And I don't mean to get like super real for a second or anything, but like, you know, it just, I think the term successful artist is so subjective because like, you know, you waking up, you have an idea in your head 4 or 5 to 6 months later, it's in post production. Like that's a win right there.
Absolutely. I
So
mean,
yeah,
and there's a big picture aspect of it too, right? So like it's absolutely valid. I feel it's absolutely valid what we've just said. But to someone who to a different person, whether it's one of us or someone listening, maybe their idea of success is financial success, and they just happen to be really driven to
my money. Yeah.
yeah, well, no, they're driven to
Or
they're driven to create. They're driven to work in the arts, whatever their
yeah.
chosen art is. For us, it's film, right? That's kind of like where we come from. But you know, it could be anything. They could be making beaded bracelets. I don't know. Pick an art, right? So whatever it is that they do, that they're driven to do, and they want that to be their career, but they're worried about money, right? Now that shifts things a little bit. Um, I think again, you have to break it down. You have to kind of figure out, what does success mean to you? If again, to some people, like, so how do I say this delicately? Everybody has different financial needs, right? Because the
Yeah.
things they want in life all come with different price tags. Some people want the $750,000 house in the woods, you know, on like 2 acres of land,
Yeah.
because they want to farm and they want to be self-sufficient. And some people just want that $6,000 a month rental in Manhattan because they want to be where the stuff is. They want to walk down their stairs and be in the heart of it all, right?
Hmm.
Two completely different lifestyles, both equally expensive, right? In their own unique ways. So where does each individual person define success when it comes to money? I think that if you are making enough to cover your overhead and still put a little bit aside, you're fine. You're
Hmm.
successful.
Yeah.
You're not what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you wouldn't consider yourself rich necessarily. I mean, not by modern standards, right? I'm talking like you might not have millions in the bank, but if you're feeding yourself, clothing yourself, you have a roof over your head, as long as those things are, at a good degree of upkeep, right? Like you're not um you have clothes on your back, they're not riddled with holes. You're eating food, but you're feeding yourself properly, getting good nutrition. The roof over your head isn't leaking rainwater every time it rains. You're fine. You're successful. That, to me, in my opinion, that would be the definition of success. Where people get hung up is that they're constantly comparing themselves to others. Now,
Yeah.
it's one thing to have goals, long-term goals, all that, right? Like you might be fine with your small little studio rental for now, and then you want the single family home down the road. That is not an indication of not being successful. Not yet having reached a goal is not an indication of being a failure. What you do about it indicates whether you're successful or not. So there's a great writer who is no longer with us. My wife discovered him years ago. His name is Chuck Bowden, or Charles Bowden. He was a journalist. He wrote for Mother Jones and a few other publications. He also has a bunch of books out of his own writing, and he really liked to focus on. He was from like the, I hope I don't get this wrong. Either like the Arizona or New Mexico area. He loved to talk about the Sonoran Desert, so maybe even California. I forget where exactly he lived, but out west, right? Um, and he had a great quote one time where someone asked him, where do you find time to write these books? Like, you're doing your job as a journalist, writing these articles and getting paid and doing the research and going out. He was like an investigative journalist, I believe, to some extent. He would go out on the front lines in Mexico, down in Juarez, and like come back and write about the war zone that it is,
Hmm.
right? But then he'd come back and he'd write, you know, books on his own that he would have to write and then, publish and then make money on. And they said, well, how do you know that, you have enough money to stop working doing your journalism to do this? And he said, if I have coffee in my cup, I have enough money. And that always stuck with me. That
Hmm.
to me, that hit a profound spot in my soul, because not just because I'm an absolute caffeine addict, but um, but because, like, for him, that was the measure of whether or not he was doing well enough to stop working for months at a time to write a book to have it published. For
Yeah.
him, that was the bare necessity he needed to feel that he was doing okay in life. And sort of threw away the materialist uh mindset that we're all entrenched in right now, and just said, you know what, I have a place to live. As long as I have coffee, I'm good. And I was like, I want to be like that. I wish that I could be like that. I wish I could be like, that's all I need, right? But I thought that was a really valid point, and I think that a lot of people would save themselves a lot of self-hatred if they would adopt even a a, a minor version of that, and to tell themselves that, like, I don't need to be making six figures. I just need to have my basic needs met and have enough money to put aside for a rainy day, or to invest in the things that I want to invest in down the road, whether that's more gear for your art, or a bigger place to live, or to start a family. And again, you have a daughter on the way. Your picture of your financial needs are different from someone who's just starting out, or different from someone who is older
Mhm.
and never had kids and that was never a thing. I mean, it's not a hidden fact of life that having children costs money. I mean,
Yeah.
medical bills, school, clothing, and they grow out of their clothing like every week, right? So
Yeah.
there's, I'm sure, other people with kids will tell you that. Um, so, for you personally, like, you're gonna have to look at that and be like, well, maybe my benchmark for success is gonna change every week, you know? And as long as you're doing the things and you're putting in the effort and you're getting yourself across that line to get to what you need, then I think that's success. That's success.
Yeah.
We get really soaked up in this social media stuff, and we're like, oh man, that dude, I'm friends with him on Facebook, and man, he's doing all this cool shit. He's all
And we don't know how much of it's true and false and all that. Yeah.
so how much of it is true, but also how much of it is as glamorous as it looks,
As
right?
it look, yeah.
I mean, social media is a best of, right? It's a
Yeah.
highlight reel. No one's gonna Not many people are gonna talk about the moments that things are absolute shit. And you'll have everybody's like, "Oh man, I'm feeling down today." People who are like, looking for pity parties, or, maybe they're just being genuine, they're just being honest with people. But for the most part, if you're an artist and you show up at a job and you totally botch it, you're not going on Facebook or on Instagram or TikTok or any of that and talking about how you totally boned an opportunity to,
Yeah.
to knock it out of the park. Because shit, man, I mean, I don't know about you, but I get most of my work from social media. So, like, I'm not going to go on there and talk about the time that my time code thing didn't work, or,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
the batteries died and I didn't realize it or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, I'm not gonna go on there. I'm gonna be like, look at how awesome I am. Look at all the stuff I'm doing. I worked
yeah.
with a DP who had a really, impressive portfolio of branded material that he did for some pretty big companies. But the dude had messed up his back terribly, years prior in a different line of work. And I'm trying not to be too specific because I don't want to
Yeah.
call anybody out. But you know fantastic DP, I loved working with him. But at some point it got to where, like, he tweaked his back one too many times, and he had a hard time even getting up and walking around. And but
Damn.
in the meantime, he was dealing with back pain. We'd stop and have breaks on set, and he'd be like taking, like, some natural pain remedy herbal stuff or whatever he would do. And but on Instagram, in a photo of him walking around with he were doing whatever he's doing, you wouldn't know the dude's in pain the whole time, right? You'd be like, wow, what a
Yeah.
cool job. And it's like, nah, he's
Yeah.
miserable right now.
Yeah, no,
Like,
he's
he's
Hurting like a motherfucker.
he
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
wait to put that thing down and not have to
Yeah.
work for the rest of the day. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a tricky thing, man. I mean, I see people. So I it, if we weren't clear about it earlier, I had gone to school because I wanted to be a better shooter and editor, and I caught the audio bug while I was there, and I transitioned into sound. So I do
Mhm.
production sound, and I do post production sound. And thanks to COVID, most of my production sound gigs dried up. So I've been primarily post production
Sound
for the
design.
last
Yeah.
couple of years, sound design, dialogue editing, mixing. Um, but I caught that bug and I was working on that. But uh I know firsthand that you're only as good as your last gig. And I know I'm friends with people on there, again, casually friends with, we're not getting together, who've worked on some pretty big projects. I mean,
Yeah.
stuff that I might get a cease and desist for naming. Um,
Yeah.
and they're the nicest people, but they were out of work for a while too. They were hurting.
How
It's
it
like,
always is.
yeah, it's like you can work on the biggest thing. Once that paycheck runs out, once that money is spent, if you're not booked again by the same people, it don't mean anything. It
Mhm.
goes on your IMDb, it goes on your reel, people know you for it, and then you have the added fun of people wondering, well, that person worked on that massive, massive show. Like, why do they seem so sad, and why don't I see their name more often?
Yeah.
Um, some of it's a matter of who you know. I strongly feel it's about who knows you. Um,
Yes.
it's
It's all
I
networking. I
know.
feel like
Oh,
it's more and more networking than anything else, honestly.
absolutely, absolutely.
Honestly, it's about who you can impress, and then they give you the opportunity, and then
once you get that opportunity, if you sink or swim, then that's up to you. But I really do think it's about who you know.
But even, like, even if you swim, having to, again, like I said, about your own situation, having to regularly, like with frequency, adjust your benchmark of success, because
Yeah,
you could be coming off of a show for a major network, or even just a major streaming platform or something, making a boatload of money. Everybody knows, at least in the proper circles, everybody knows your name. They know you're
yeah,
responsible for this amazing art, and then for some reason or another you don't get hired again for anything major for like another 6 to 9 months. And people who know you, including yourself, are like, well, wait, what happened? Like,
exactly.
I was riding high. Did I just fail? Did I
Yeah,
completely fall off the face of the earth? And yeah, no, it's again, it's about setting healthy expectations for yourself, and managing those expectations, because they are going to change. It's going to be an ebb and
Hmm. Man, this was I love talking to you. I loved just your, like, your outlook and positivity, and you're right. It's a very ebb and flow. If certain artists didn't know that now, they will. They'll learn it for sure. Um,
Actually,
yeah.
I got to stop you for 1 second, because it's really funny. I'm always shocked whenever someone says that I have like a level of positivity, because I am the most cynical son of a bitch you're gonna meet.
Well, no, so am I. But I feel like my cynicism kind of just is up and up front and all that. I try really hard to think about, like, oh, well, it could be worse. I'm trying really hard, like mentioned a while back, like I'm trying hard to, like, appreciate and live, like, think, like, try to enjoy when I'm on set now, instead of being like, okay, this is made and I cut it together and it didn't get into a festival, well, then it must suck. Like, I'm just trying to appreciate every little step along the way, right? Because you just, I don't know, like, I don't want to keep bringing it up. I feel like I bring it up every episode, but kind of just seeing, like, what was taken away from my stepdad, like that, that I think has put a lot of perspective into, like, you know, just not trying to take a lot of shit for granted. So, but I appreciate you coming on here, spending your night with me, and talking and all that. And I hope we get to work together one day in the future, or at least meet for a cup of coffee, a beer, or food, or whatever. And just shoot the shit. And yeah, man, I appreciate you again. And guys, this is another episode of Where Is My Mind, a podcast about about mental health and the arts. And once again, it's Rob Acocella. And thank you again for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. It was my pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you guys for listening. Once again, this is Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. I'm host and producer of the podcast, Christopher Orangeo. All episodes will be available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, and Amazon Music. Once again, this is Chris Orangeo, and thank you for supporting.